You know that old saying, never meet your heroes? Well, for a whole lot of people, James Corden became the living, breathing embodiment of that phrase. He built this incredible empire on being the funny, humble, down-to-earth guy next door, and the world absolutely adored him for it. But behind all the laughter, behind the sing-alongs in the car, a very different story was unfolding. It was a story of ego, of bullying, and eventually of a public downfall that would bring his entire Hollywood career crashing down.
So that's the big question, right? How did a man who was marketed as TV's absolute friendliest face become one of its most disliked figures? That's what we're going to dig into. We're going to track the incredible rise and the even more spectacular fall of James Corden. And it's a story that tells you a lot about fame, about public personas, and what happens when the mask starts to slip.
To really get how it all fell apart, we've got to go back to the very beginning. James Corden's story starts in London back in 1978. He had a pretty standard British working-class upbringing, nothing super fancy, but comfortable. And this background, it would become the absolute cornerstone of his entire public image. He wasn't some polished star, he was one of us. He was down to earth, he was relatable.
So he starts out in the 90s, doing the actor thing. A bit part here, a small role there. His first real break came in the year 2000 on a show called Fat Friends. But the most important thing about that show is that it's where he met writer Ruth Jones. And together, they cooked up an idea for a sitcom. That show, Gavin and Stacey, would make James Corden a household name all across the UK.
And when I say a household name, I mean it. Gavin and Stacey wasn't just a hit, it was a massive cultural phenomenon in Britain. And here's the craziest part. Corden wasn't even Gavin or Stacey, but his character, Smithy, became the absolute breakout star of the show. Everybody loved him. And with that success, the offers just started pouring in. He was hosting award shows, popping up on panel shows. James Corden was officially a big deal.
All right, so you've conquered the UK. What's next? Well, for a lot of people, there's only one answer: America. And his strategy for winning over a brand new country was actually pretty simple. He just doubled down on that humble, relatable persona that made him famous in the first place.
In 2014, it was announced James Corden is the new host of The Late Late Show. And honestly, at first, it felt like a brilliant choice. He was the perfect contrast to all the other slick, super confident late-night hosts. He just seemed like a normal guy who was genuinely having fun with his guests. And for American TV, it was a totally refreshing change of pace.
But the real stroke of genius, the thing that launched him into the stratosphere, was Carpool Karaoke. See, Corden's team understood the power of viral social media moments way before a lot of their competitors did. This segment was basically a machine built to get clicks and shares online. It pulled in these massive audiences, made the show a must-see, and turned Corden into a global superstar. He had officially made it. So at this point, he's on top of the world. He has a hit talk show, he's hosting the biggest awards ceremonies, his movie career's taking off. Everything he touched just seemed to turn to gold. But, and you knew there was a but coming, those old rumors about his ego and being difficult behind the scenes, well, they were starting to bubble up again. And this time, the public was about to get its first real glimpse of the man behind the persona.
And look, these issues weren't new. They've been simmering for years, even back in the UK. His sudden fame was apparently changing him. It got so bad that his Gavin and Stacey co-star had to step in. Even Corden's own sister gave him this incredibly blunt piece of advice. When your own family is telling you that, you know it's a problem.
But the first major public crack in that friendly facade came at the 2010 Glamour Awards. Corden was hosting, and Sir Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard himself, gets on stage and calls him out, right there, in front of everyone. He basically told him all for being unprofessional and arrogant. It was this shocking, super awkward moment. And it was the first time the public saw this huge disconnect between the guy on screen and the person people were describing behind the scenes.
Now, he tried to laugh that off, of course. But the thing is, it wasn't just an isolated incident. More and more stories started to leak out, and they all suggested this consistent pattern of obnoxious, entitled, and frankly bullying behavior. It completely contradicted the public image he had so carefully built. The persona was beginning to collapse.
And this is really the heart of the whole James Corden story. On one side, you have the brand, the happy-go-lucky, relatable guy you'd love to grab a beer with. And on the other, you have this growing mountain of stories painting him as arrogant, entitled, and just plain rude. As time went on, the evidence for that second version just kept piling up.
And the revelations just became
relentless. On his own show, he couldn't even name 2 of his cameramen when a guest challenged him. He did a Reddit Ask Me Anything session that turned into a complete disaster, just filled with people sharing stories of his rudeness. Then allegations came out about him throwing tantrums on set. And then, of course, the big one. The owner of a New York restaurant, Balthazar, publicly banned him for supposedly screaming at the staff.
The backlash got so intense that it started to affect his job in very real ways. After his performance in the movie Cats, which, let's be honest, almost nobody liked, a petition was started to prevent him from being cast in the upcoming Wicked movie. It got over 100,000 signatures. This wasn't just online chatter anymore, this was a quantifiable, widespread public movement against him.
And all of this, inevitably, led to some really serious consequences. A ruined reputation in Hollywood is a tough thing to come back from, and the damage to his public image was now hitting his career where it hurts, the bottom line. The crash was coming.
And the numbers tell the whole story. As all the negative press mounted, people just started tuning out. Even small things, like the revelation that he wasn't always actually driving during Carpool Karaoke, helped shatter the whole illusion. And the result? By early 2023, his show's weekly viewership had been cut in half in just 6 months. The ratings were in an absolute freefall.
And the end came really, really fast. In April 2023, Corden announced he was leaving the show. Soon after, the network basically said thanks but no thanks and confirmed the show itself was being taken off the air for good. With his public image in tatters and his American dream pretty much over, Corden announced he was moving his family back to the UK.
So what does all this mean? Well, ultimately, James Corden's story is a modern cautionary tale about fame. It's a perfect example of what can happen when success comes too quickly and maybe without the maturity to really handle it. His entire career was built on this public persona that, it seems, he just couldn't maintain once the camera stopped rolling.
And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. Was James Corden a good guy who was simply crushed by the insane pressures of modern celebrity, where every little flaw is put under a magnifying glass? Or was the jolly, relatable everyman just a character all along, a mask that eventually slipped to reveal the real person underneath? That's something to think about.